Parliament's Public Accounts Watchdog, SCOPA, or the Standing Committee on Public Accounts, says it will take a closer look at how money is being used in local government after concerns over large amounts of money being wasted. Now, the committee's chair, Songezo Zibi, says municipalities must explain why funds meant for services are disappearing instead of helping communities. The review, which comes as the national budget is being processed, will scrutinise how municipal budgets are handled and aim to hold authorities to account for persistent losses and weak oversight. Let's now make sense of the upcoming engagements. The Standing Committee on Public Accounts Chairperson, Songezo Zibi, joining us now to have this discussion. Songezo, thank you. Appreciate the time this morning, and a good morning to you. Overall, I mean, what changes? What does this oversight actually do that it wasn't perhaps doing previously?
Good morning, Arabile. So this is part of the strategy that we adopted last year. Essentially, what the committee decided to do is to pick themes, agencies and authorities that have got the most impact on rebuilding the economy. That meant we chose carefully which metros and municipalities we're going to focus on, which state-owned companies, and so on. So, for example, the transport ecosystem, the transport and logistics ecosystem is part of that package. The reason we're looking at municipalities together with the Portfolio Committee on Cooperative Governance is that every business that is supposed to employ people is in a municipality. If municipalities spend 3% of their budget on infrastructure instead of 8 to 10%, you are going to have a problem with water, with electricity, and so on. And therefore, we intend, together with the Auditor General and the Special Investigating Unit, to focus on some municipalities that are critical, as well as some of the capital projects, so that the infrastructure spending that the finance minister announced does not fall into the same problem that we've seen over the years. That is the purpose, and that was the context of my remarks. Okay, very interesting. I mean, one would also say that this has been a long time coming. It should have possibly happened a while ago, but as we head into a local government election year and we go a lot more into it, we also had that announcement of the 1 trillion rand infrastructure package that is set forth. Are those the key reasons that we're looking at this now? Because one hopes that it's not just a short-term fix to have this oversight. No, we're not looking at it now, Arabile. We started last year. In fact, the hearings that we are having over the next 2 weeks in Parliament are a year later. In March last year, we were at OR Tambo District Municipality in the Eastern Cape, which is very important to the tourism sector in the Eastern Cape, down the Wild Coast and so on. Is critical for farming, especially small-scale farming, etc. We went to Buffalo City. Farmers need Buffalo City, the motor industry, manufacturing sector, etc. So this is a follow-up. Like I said at the beginning of my remarks, we took a deliberate strategy to focus on certain municipalities. Yeah. There are too many of them. We can't do all of them that are critical to economic recovery and the creation of jobs. So there's a small portfolio of municipalities we've been looking at since last year. This is not a new thing. Yeah. Are you able to share how many exactly of those municipalities you'll be looking at? No, most of the metros, for instance, fall under that category, but also municipalities in key industries. So, for example, the eastern limb of the Bushveld complex, which is the Rustenburg area, we're going to be looking at. The eastern limb is in Limpopo, the western limb is Rustenburg, the eastern limb similarly. The municipalities that sit at the intersection of the stock and other forms of farming in the Northern Free State and so on. So that is the approach that we are taking as a committee, so that as those municipalities hopefully begin to get their act together, investment will return to those areas, and the money that Treasury allocates for infrastructure purposes begins to hit the mark. What systemic changes do we need, though? Particularly to break the cycle of corruption and failure. I believe previously we've heard people speak of a culture of impunity when it comes to infrastructure projects. How exactly do we change that systemically? No, there are lots of interventions that are going to be made. I mean, the requirement that the Treasury has put in place, or the Cabinet has put in place, which is some of these municipalities must have that municipalities need to have special agencies that focus specifically on network industries like water and so on. this is not a panacea, unfortunately. We've also had a look at the city of Johannesburg, where nearly all the agencies, bar one or two, have had terrible audit outcomes in the last 2 financial years. That's not a panacea. What I believe needs to happen is for the government to be a lot stricter in terms of the enforcement of some of the requirements of expenditure. You can't have a municipality spending 3% on infrastructure maintenance, and then we get surprised later on when there's no water and there are 30 to 50% water losses and so on. So I believe that the MECs of COGTA, as well as the national government, need to be a lot stricter, intervene a lot sooner. And in that respect, I think we should develop legislation around Section 100 of the Constitution to make those interventions a lot stronger and a lot sooner.
What does accountability then look like in cases where those have been flouted or haven't, or there's been what we'd call a dereliction of duty possibly as well, people not actually doing their jobs the way they should have? You still have those water losses, the infrastructure damage still vast, no fixing of it, etc. What should then the accountability factor be on that?
The ultimate accountability, Arabile, and I'm saying this with the greatest of care, is that it always needs to happen at the polls, because the problem with local government is this: the people that make the bad decisions, don't implement consequence management and so on, are elected by local residents as the council. So the national government and provincial government are not allowed to intervene without good reason, which is often when things have collapsed. So national government cannot run councils on its own. Treasury is not allowed to do that. So what you find is that things have to completely fall apart before a municipality can be placed under administration, with a lot of suffering. What we lack at local government is people with the capability to run those municipalities. It's a profound problem. It is widespread, and we continue to throw good money after bad as a consequence.
There've been suggestions of a procurement panel of sorts and a procurement body that would hold continued oversight over infrastructure, but specifically over tenders. And one imagines that even with this infrastructure, spending of 1 trillion rand, a lot would go out to tender. Should that be in place? Should we be looking at the tender system a little bit more and having some kind of procurement panel to oversee this?
So what the President or Finance Minister was referring to is a tribunal, because when there is a dispute around the awarding of a tender, it gets onto the normal court roll. And it takes years for that matter to be resolved. So the tribunal would then adjudicate over those matters quickly, so that those projects that have been suspended can then be implemented as soon as that tribunal reaches a decision. So that is the one thing. When I spoke about a capability, is that contract management is terrible, particularly at local government. So you find that the very clauses in the contract do not protect the municipality or authority sufficiently in the case of service providers who get paid and then don't perform the work. That is number one. Number two, the project management is exceptionally weak, such that I believe that for certain critical projects, one of the changes that must be made is that the project management and contract management are taken out of the hands of the municipality if it has got a track record of not being able to manage those, and be given to an agency like the Development Bank of Southern Africa. Otherwise, the same thing continues to happen. The reality, Arabile, is that we need systemic wholesale changes across the different spheres of government. We need to strengthen legislation, but fundamentally, we really need professionals who are capable. And at local government, you often struggle to find people who can manage the affairs that they've been entrusted with, especially with incapable and bad politicians at the top.
Yeah, and I think that becomes one of the key issues. Songezo, we do have a poll running this morning, actually, in relation to this, and we've been asking our audience, what is the state of infrastructure in their municipality? What does it feel like? What does it look like? And as we said, it's a local government election year, and perhaps this highlights a significant portion of that. I don't know how much of this you can actually see on your screen right now, but
I can.
6% saying well-maintained. So, I mean, we'd like to know, one, where they are, but the remaining 94%
not
looking good.
Yeah, there must be in a few pockets throughout the country. It is true the infrastructure is not in a good state. Whether you're talking about roads, you're talking about electricity infrastructure and so on. I mean, Newzroom Afrika viewers often get irritated by the difference between load shedding and what municipalities call load reduction, or whatever the case is. The latter happens when the local municipal distribution infrastructure has not been maintained. So there's enough electricity from Eskom. They are simply not able to deliver it to residents. The same thing happens with water. I know we all like to shout at Minister Phemisa Jordina. The national water infrastructure managed by the Department of Water and Sanitation is generally fine. It needs investment, it needs a lot more attention. But the serious problems begin when that water leaves the water boards to go on to municipalities, because the local distribution infrastructure is not being maintained, which is what is reflected in that poll.
Very interesting one there as well. Okay, just very quickly, I've run out of time, but the budget process, how's that finishing up? Of course, you've got yourselves, you've got the Standing Committee on Finance, appropriations also involved here. Has that been finalized?
No, of course not. There's about 14 days left before, in fact, 13 days left before the fiscal framework is finalized. Then we're going to move into what is called the Division of Revenue Bill, which is the division of the budget between national, provincial, and local municipalities. That is going to happen somewhere around April. And then from then on until the end of June to early July, you're going to have the budget votes, and eventually the budget process will be completed in Parliament.
Yeah, and I don't think we actually understood how this process went last year. Certainly helped us a lot in getting that process through. Songezo, appreciate the time. Thank you so much for joining us on the channel to give us just the highlights when it comes to that probe into crumbling municipal infrastructure, the significance and importance thereof. And